Right now, we are tracking some of the new revelations about the deadly terrorist attack in Libya and how it was handled by the Obama administration. The story, though, seems to be pretty much falling off the radar when it comes to most in the mainstream media. Why? Let's check in with our Newswatch panel. Judith Miller is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter. Kirsten Powers is a columnist for the Daily Beast. Both are Fox News contributors. We touched on this earlier in Happening Now with Jonah Goldberg from the National Review. He pointed out in one of his articles, Judith, that, for instance, the media made a big deal out of George W. Bush's DUI conviction 2.5 decades earlier, in the days leading up to the election in 2000. There were other examples that he cited, but nobody seems to care in the mainstream media about what happened in Benghazi that left 4 Americans dead. ABC News hasn't touched the story on World News Tonight for a week. Why?
Well, I think the story, unfortunately, has become politicized, and it shouldn't be politicized. It should be considered a story. And what's astonishing to me is that in the weekend news shows, there was no anchor who raised this issue. They dealt with all kinds of issues, from abortion to the election to the storm. Nobody was dealing with this issue except for Bob Schieffer, and only when he was asked about it, when John McCain specifically made a comment about it. It is really stunning. Ever so slowly, the mainstream media are beginning to pay attention to some of the conflicting narratives and the questions that have been raised by reporters who are looking at this story. And a shout out to Eli Lake and to Fox News and to the others who've been pursuing it. But we only know what we know about what happened in Benghazi, not from the administration, but from reporting and reporters who've gone on asking those questions.
Kirsten, do you see it differently?
No. Look, the mainstream media is completely pathetic. It's no longer possible to defend them. There are only a couple of people I can name. I would say Jake Tapper. Yeah, that's it, pretty much. Jake Tapper is really the only one out there who I think is acts as a legitimate reporter anymore. And I also think that part of what's going on here is that the Obama administration was very successful with their war on Fox News, and that wasn't just an accident. I think they realized that there are great reporters here who are going to hold them accountable. And so what has happened is you've had Catherine Herridge, and you've had Brett Baer, and you've had Jennifer Griffin doing really great work, really original reporting on this. And you don't see the other networks citing it because I think they've been cowed by the Obama administration, who probably is saying, oh, well, you can't trust Fox, because that's been their whole talking point, because they know that nobody else is going to hold them accountable. And this is as much of a scandal, the way the media has behaved, than actually what's happened in Libya.
Judy, you mentioned, you used the word politicization.
Yes.
The Obama administration has essentially cowed many of its critics by saying, oh, you can't politicize this tragedy, you can't politicize foreign policy. But the fact is, when you get ready to go to an election, I mean, this kind of attack and how it is handled, that's politics. You're electing somebody who is, well, how they're going to handle this kind of thing. Doesn't it deserve to be considered by the voting public?
Of course it does, and that's why it's such a shame that this has happened and that the media have been co-conspirators in letting it happen. You have to ask yourself, it's true, a plurality of Americans do not believe that the President and the White House misled the American people about what happened in Benghazi. But that's not the same as being honest about what happened in Benghazi, and they are not telling us about that, and they are
Who cares what the majority of Americans think? They're not getting any information.
That's why they think that,
Of course they think that. Nobody's reporting on it. And when they are reporting on it, they're carrying water for the administration.
I am just as upset as you are, but I predict that eventually so much has now come out about this story that the mainstream media will have to pursue it, but they want to pursue it after the election and not before. Hence the politicization of this story and why it's so damaging and so not in America's interest.
We are going to have to leave it there. Judith Miller, Kirsten Powers, thank you both.
Thank you.
And Happening Now will be back in a moment.